The morning sun glinted off the towering crane as three weary construction workers, Sam, Miguel, and Tony, stepped onto a gritty Philadelphia worksite near the Schuylkill River. None of them expected anything unusual from this routine day, but life had its own plans. An odd whimper from beneath a collapsed tarp halted their steps. At first glance, it looked like a pitiful, mud-caked puppy, shivering and clinging to life. Compelled by compassion and curiosity, they gently scooped it up, fully unaware that a single act of kindness would unravel a life-altering discovery for both the men and the tiny, trembling creature in their hands. The roar of the jackhammer and the steady clank of steel beams set the backdrop on the industrial lot just west of Philadelphia's City Hall. New high-rise condos were scheduled to stand where only rubble and half-forgotten memories remained. Sam, Miguel, and Tony had been working at the site for months, forging an easy camaraderie that only came from long hours spent toiling side by side. Their jokes lightened the burden of back-breaking labor, and their collective dream of a more secure future for their families kept them moving. That morning, as they arrived at sunrise, the trio sensed the same routine awaited them, hauling debris, drilling, and coordinating with the foreman for the day's tasks. But fate had something unexpected in store. Walking toward the scaffolding, Miguel paused abruptly, lifting a hand to signal the others. "Hey," he said, voice tentative, "did you hear that?" A muffled whimper echoed from beneath a collapsed tarp near a stack of concrete blocks. The three men exchanged glances. In a place where heavy machinery and loose debris abounded, the cry of an animal was both startling and heart-wrenching. They approached carefully, shifting the tarp. Beneath it, caked in mud and trembling with fear, was a small creature at first glance, a filthy puppy. Tony, the gentle giant of the group, squatted down, his big calloused hands moving with surprising tenderness. "You poor little thing," he murmured. "How did you end up here?" The puppy, if that's what it was, could barely move. Its fur was tangled with dirt, and it seemed too weak to stand. It stared back at them, wide-eyed, and let out another pitiful whimper. The creature was alone, frightened, and possibly injured. Miguel, who had grown up on a small farm in New Jersey, had a natural instinct for animal care. "We can't just leave it like this," he said, voice firm. "Let's see if we can clean it up and figure out what's going on." "Might have a collar under all that mud," Tony nodded. "I'll go grab some water. Maybe some rags from the trailer." Sam, still uneasy, looked around to see if they were being watched. He rubbed a hand over his short beard. "We should be careful. Dogs wander onto sites sometimes. But this one looks too small to have wandered far." He paused, glancing at the trembling bundle. "We can't let it suffer." Within minutes, they'd assembled what they needed: a few buckets of water, clean rags, and a gentle dish soap from the break area. They made a makeshift washing station using an old wooden plank set across two cinder blocks. Gently, they set the shaking creature on the plank and began running lukewarm water over its fur. Dirt poured off in rivulets, revealing tiny paws and a frail body that seemed thinner than any healthy puppy should be. The creature whimpered at first, its eyes wide with fear. But as the men carefully massaged the soap through its fur, it began to relax. Sam even caught a faint sigh, as though the warmth and gentle hands were a relief. Layer by layer, the mud fell away, revealing a coat that was not the typical brown or black of a stray pup. Instead, a mix of smoky greys and delicate tawny patches emerged, patterns that none of them quite recognized. By the time they'd washed most of the dirt from its body, each man found himself gaping in astonishment. This was no ordinary puppy. Its elongated snout and angular features suggested a different lineage, a wild one, perhaps. Tony and Miguel exchanged stunned glances, while Sam gently wiped the creature's muzzle with a clean rag, heart pounding. "Guys," he said, voice low, this might not be a dog." Uncertainty crackled in the air. Though smaller than a typical canine, something about the ears, the coloration, and the shape of the face spoke of a different species altogether. Yet it was so young, so helpless, and so obviously in need of care. Miguel looked at the others, water dripping from his chin. What do we do now? They had stumbled upon a mystery, one that would upend their assumptions and lead them on a journey far beyond the confines of their construction site. None of them could have imagined that beneath the mud and fear lay a fragile life that would connect them to a deeper purpose, challenging their own notions of responsibility, empathy, and what it truly meant to protect the vulnerable. Still reeling from their discovery, the three men transferred the freshly washed creature to a soft blanket. They needed a moment to absorb what they'd just uncovered. Though it looked vaguely canine, something about it suggested it didn't belong in a suburban household. Its ears were slightly pointed, its muzzle longer. Spots of reddish-brown fur shimmered under the morning sun, interlaced with a greyish-white undercoat. It was as if some unseen painter had added strokes of colour that defied classification. The little one gazed up at them with fearful eyes, though the edge of panic seemed to be wearing off. Now cradled in a somewhat clean blanket, it exhaled a small, weary sigh, like it was resigned to the hands of these towering figures who had, at least, given it some relief from the dirt and grime. Sam, Miguel, and Tony exchanged glances, each reflecting a mix of curiosity, concern, and the faintest glimmer of excitement. The morning sun continued its climb, bathing the site in a light that felt warmer, more alive than usual. Miguel couldn't help but recall his childhood on the farm. He'd once nursed a nest of orphaned baby birds back to health, feeding them with a dropper until they were strong enough to fly away. But he'd never seen anything quite like this. Looking at the creature now, he softly murmured, "I wonder if it's a fox or a coyote pup." Tony scratched the back of his neck, eyes still locked on the trembling form. "I've seen foxes around my neighborhood before, but never one this young, and definitely not in a place like this." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Whatever it is, it's definitely not your everyday puppy. We need help. Maybe we should call a vet or some animal rescue center." At the mention of professional help, an unexpected ripple of hesitation passed between them. They knew that a wild animal might mean complications, permits, potential quarantine, or even the possibility that it couldn't be released back into the wild if it got too used to humans. But each of them also felt a pull, a responsibility to ensure this fragile life didn't slip away. The men realized they should probably alert their foreman, Bill Anderson, about the situation. They wrapped the creature in the blanket and headed toward the main office trailer, where Bill was reviewing the day's paperwork. His gruff demeanor and no-nonsense approach to deadlines made them wonder how sympathetic he'd be. But they had little choice. Entering the trailer, they found Bill hunched over a desk, littered with blueprints. He barely looked up from his notes. "What is it, guys? We're behind schedule. And..." He paused abruptly when he saw the tiny bundle in Miguel's arms. "What in the world?" Sam exhaled, stepping forward. "We found this little... Well, we're not sure if it's a puppy or not. It was covered in mud under a tarp. Might be hurt or sick." Bill's brow furrowed, and for a moment none of them knew what to expect. To their surprise, the stern lines on his face softened. "You say it might not be a dog?" Tony nodded, pulling back a corner of the blanket to reveal the animal's unique coloring. "Looks like a wild pup. Fox, maybe. We're not really sure." Bill set down his pen and sighed. "All right, I'm not heartless. This is a construction site, not a haven for wildlife. But we can't just let it suffer." He pulled out his phone, searched quickly, and scribbled a number on a piece of paper. "Call the Skill Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. They deal with these sorts of situations. They're near Fairmount Park." Relief washed over the three men. "Thanks, Bill," Miguel said. "We appreciate this. Just make sure this doesn't slow down the project," Bill added, returning to his usual gruffness. "And keep me updated." With that minor hurdle cleared, they stepped back outside into the bright morning. The creature shifted in Miguel's arms, letting out a small squeak. It sounded hungry, but also seemed exhausted from the ordeal. Sam glanced at the phone number. "I'll make the call. Let's see if they can send someone out, or if we need to bring it in." Miguel and Tony exchanged a look. Neither wanted to simply hand the pup off without ensuring it would be all right. They were feeling a growing sense of protectiveness, one that tugged at them like an invisible thread. This dirty little scrap of life had suddenly become their shared responsibility. Moments later, Sam stepped away to dial the rescue center. While he waited on hold, Tony crouched down and offered the pup a little more water from a plastic cup. As it drank tentatively, a sense of tenderness filled the air, an unlikely scene in a place defined by concrete and steel. When Sam returned, he wore a cautious smile. "They said we should bring it in if we can. They're short-staffed today, but they have a vet on site who specializes in wildlife. They'll check it out." Miguel lifted the pup and nodded. "All right, let's do it. I'll drive." Tony, glancing at his watch, grimaced. "We'll probably catch hell for leaving, but Bill did say to keep him updated. We're only gone for a little while, right?" Sam shrugged. "Let's do what we've got to do. Better for the pup to see a professional sooner rather than later." With that, they headed to the parking lot. In the background, the clamor of construction continued, metal against metal, the grunt of diesel engines, and the hum of daily survival. But for these three men, the day had already taken a radically different shape. They were no longer just building a structure. They were nurturing a fragile spark of life. And that single shift, small, though it seemed, held the power to change them in ways they couldn't yet foresee. The Schuylkill Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was tucked away near the edge of Fairmount Park, amid a canopy of tall oaks and elms. From the outside, it looked more like a quaint suburban home than an official facility, with a wraparound porch and a small wooden sign sporting the image of a soaring hawk. Miguel parked his pickup truck in a gravel driveway. As the men stepped out, they noticed the distinct hush of nature that stood in stark contrast to the cacophony of the construction site. The soft rustle of leaves in the wind replaced the grind of machinery. A blackbird hopped along the edge of a nearby bird bath, regarding them curiously as they approached the entrance. Inside, the reception area smelled faintly of antiseptic and wood polish. The walls were lined with pictures of rescued animals, owls, foxes, raccoons, even a fawn. Each photo told a story of survival, of second chances. A tall, lean man in his late 30s greeted them from behind the desk. His name tag read Jordan. "Hey there, can I help you?" Jordan asked, eyeing the blanket-wrapped bundle in Miguel's arms. "We found this little one at our construction site," Tony said. "At first we thought it was a puppy, but once we washed it, we weren't so sure." Jordan's expression softened. "Let's have a look." He led them to a back room where a stainless steel exam table stood next to cabinets filled with medical supplies. Bright overhead lighting made every detail starkly visible. They carefully laid the pup on the table. Now more alert, it lifted its tiny head and let out a soft cry, as if unsure whether these new surroundings were friend or foe. Its fur still held damp patches, and its ears quivered. Jordan slipped on a pair of latex gloves, gently examining the pup's ears, paws, and muzzle. He pressed lightly along its abdomen, checking for signs of injury. The creature squirmed a bit, but mostly seemed too tired to resist. "Well," Jordan said after a few minutes, "this isn't a dog. You were right about that. Best guess? It's a young fox kit, likely a red fox, given the coloration coming through. It's still very young, maybe 5 weeks old." Miguel felt a tremor of excitement. He'd suspected it might be a fox, but hearing it confirmed somehow made the situation feel more real and more urgent. He remembered seeing adult foxes slinking through the woods near his childhood farm, but this was the first time he'd ever been face to face with a vulnerable kit. Is it okay? Sam asked, worry lining his face. Jordan nodded, though his expression remained serious. It's malnourished, likely dehydrated, but no major injuries. The biggest immediate concern is to get fluids and see if it has any underlying infections. I'll run a quick test, and if everything checks out, we'll start it on formula and keep it under observation. Relief washed over the trio. They exchanged grateful smiles, a palpable sense of victory in the air. Yet an undercurrent of uncertainty lingered. What would happen to the kit next? Tony cleared his throat. So, how does this work? Can we keep tabs on it? Make sure it's okay? Jordan smiled, recognizing the concern. Absolutely. We encourage people who rescue animals to stay involved. But since this is a wild fox, we'll aim to rehabilitate it to the point where it can be released back into a suitable habitat. It's our policy to return them to the wild whenever possible. That's the best life for a fox. A pang of mixed emotions flickered across Miguel's face. He felt protective of the kit, but he also understood that a fox belonged in nature. Sure, he murmured, we just want to help. Jordan handed them some forms to fill out, documenting where and how they found the kit. Meanwhile, a gentle-faced veterinarian entered the room, introduced herself as Dr. Angela Morris, and began setting up the fourth drip for hydration. The men watched quietly, marveling at how calm and methodical she was. Dr. Morris offered them a reassuring smile. Thank you for bringing this little one in. Without your intervention, it might not have survived. Those words resonated deeply. Sam thought about the random circumstances that led them to discover the kit. A single moment of compassion had changed everything for the fox, certainly, but also for them. After the paperwork was done, Jordan directed them back to the reception area. We'll keep you updated. You can call to check in, and once we know more, like if it needs longer-term care or fosters, we'll let you know. They thanked him and stepped outside, hearts brimming with a mixture of relief and curiosity about what might come next. The sunlight streaming through the leaves felt warmer. The blackbird from earlier let out a melodic call as if approving of their good deed. As they walked back to the truck, Tony turned to Miguel and Sam. You guys want to grab lunch? Feels like we just went on an adventure and it's barely noon, Sam chuckled. Yeah, I could eat. Let's find a sandwich shop around here. Miguel nodded, still lost in thought. He felt an odd emptiness in his arms where the kit had been. Already he missed the little creature's soft fur and delicate whimpers, but he also felt a sense of peace. They had done the right thing. In the distance, the skyline of Philadelphia gleamed with the promise of another day's work. Their normal lives beckoned them back to the grind of labor and routine. Yet each man sensed that something had shifted, a small but profound change sparked by a dirty puppy that turned out to be a fox kit. And as they drove away, they silently wondered if they'd just played a part in a bigger story, one of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bond between humans and the wild. Returning to the construction site that afternoon felt surreal. The noise of heavy machinery and the hustle of co-workers brought them back to daily life, but a quiet sense of awe lingered. Word had spread quickly among the crew. A few other workers approached, curious about the puppy they'd found. How's the little guy? Asked Trevor, the electrician, as he coiled a length of cable. Sam grinned. Turns out it's a fox kit. The Wildlife Center says it should pull through. Trevor shook his head in amazement, handing over a half-eaten bag of chips. Well, guess I owe you a congratulations. And sorry for calling you guys crazy for running off earlier. Miguel and Tony joined Sam in recapping the morning's events, drawing a crowd of fascinated onlookers. Even Bill, the foreman, poked his head around to make sure everything was fine. Despite his usual brusque demeanor, there was a twinkle of relief in his eyes, maybe even a spark of admiration for their compassion. The day's tasks resumed hauling materials, securing beams, conferring with subcontractors. Yet beneath the mechanical routine, a collective sense of something bigger took root. The construction workers caught themselves scanning the site more intently, as if expecting another surprise. They checked hidden nooks and shadows, ensuring no other animals were stranded. In a place designed to shape steel and concrete, empathy had found a foothold. During a brief lull in the afternoon, the three men gathered by the water cooler. The conversation turned philosophical, something that rarely happened amid the sweat and grind. Crazy how a small moment can change your perspective, Tony mused, sipping water from a paper cup. Makes you think about all the times we overlook what's around us. Miguel nodded, recalling his farm days. Back home, we respected the land and the creatures on it. Coming to the city, I guess I got used to seeing less wildlife. This was a reminder that they're still out there, trying to survive in our world. Sam said nothing for a while, staring at the horizon where the towering buildings cut a stark silhouette. Finally he spoke, voice tinged with something close to reverence. I don't know if it's fate or just coincidence, but imagine if we hadn't heard that whimper, or if we'd ignored it. That kit might have died in the mud. That evening, back in his tiny apartment, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. He opened his laptop, searching for any information he could find about foxes in urban environments. Articles popped up about how foxes had adapted to living in parks, suburban areas, even city alleys. He learned about the challenges of coexisting with humans' traffic, habitat loss, and occasional hostility from people who saw them as pests. It stirred something in him, a quiet determination. He bookmarked several pages about volunteering at wildlife centers, even though he had no formal training. A voice in his head whispered, "You can help more than you realize." Meanwhile, Tony, in his small South Philadelphia row house, recounted the story to his wife and young daughter, watching their eyes light up. "A fox? Really?" his daughter exclaimed. She insisted on seeing pictures, so Tony scrolled through his phone for the few snaps he'd managed to take during the rescue. Her squeals of delight filled the living room, a melody of innocent wonder that reminded him why he worked so hard to create a better world for her to grow up in. Miguel returned to his modest townhouse near the Delaware River, his thoughts drifting back to that farm in New Jersey. He called his mother, half wanting to share the day's events and half seeking reassurance that compassion in a harsh world still mattered. She listened quietly, pride evident in her voice when she finally spoke. "Mijo, you've always had a heart for animals. Keep doing good, and good will follow." As twilight settled over Philadelphia, the city's lights twinkled like scattered fireflies. A sense of possibility pulsed through the urban landscape. None of the three men knew exactly what would become of the tiny fox kit, only that they had helped it step away from the brink. And in doing so, they'd also taken a step themselves toward a deeper awareness, toward the realization that true strength isn't just about lifting steel beams, but also about lifting up vulnerable lives. In the distance, sirens wailed and car horns blared. Life went on, gritty and unrelenting. Yet in the hearts of Sam, Miguel and Tony, a quiet flame burned, kindled by the soft whimper of a small creature that showed them how powerful a moment of compassion could be. Days turned into a week, and the men settled back into their work routines. Yet the fox kit was never far from their minds. They'd begun calling the rehab center for updates, taking turns to check on its progress. Each call strengthened their bond, not only with the creature they had saved, but also with each other. On a Wednesday morning, Sam relayed the latest news as they huddled around a partially completed drywall. Jordan said the kit's responding well to treatment. They're feeding it a specialized formula. It's gaining weight, Tony let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good. I was worried about infection. Miguel nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. They're not sure how long it'll stay there, but at least it's safe. By late afternoon, Bill the foreman approached with a new assignment. Listen, fellas, we gotta speed up the interior framing on the lower floors. You up for some overtime this week? His tone wasn't so much a request as a directive, but the men didn't mind. Extra pay was always welcome. The following days blurred into a frenzy of sawing, drilling, and fitting metal studs. Late nights became the norm, but in the back of their minds, each man held the warm memory of the kit's rescue, using it as a reservoir of strength. Even the banter on the job took on a softer edge. Instead of complaining about the long hours, they joked about the day they'd see their little fox friend running wild in a forest. One Saturday, as promised, the rehab center sent a brief text update, "Kit stable," beginning socialization with other rescued foxes. The three men exchanged triumphant fist bumps during their lunch break. Slowly but surely, the kit was becoming strong enough to meet its own kind. Off the job site, life marched on with its usual complexities. Tony's daughter was preparing a project on wildlife conservation for her school, inspired by her father's story. He helped her gather pictures of foxes, reading library books together about their habitats. It was a sweet diversion from the daily grind, and it deepened Tony's sense of responsibility for the natural world. Miguel found himself cleaning up the vacant lot next to his townhouse, picking up trash and scattered plastics. He'd never bothered much before, but now he couldn't help thinking about how litter could harm wandering animals. A small gesture, but it felt right. Sam, for his part, felt restless in his cramped apartment. He woke early on Sunday, ignoring his usual temptation to sleep in. Instead, he grabbed a coffee and headed to Fairmount Park. He walked the trails alone, the crunch of gravel underfoot serving as a metronome for his thoughts. Occasionally, he stopped to watch squirrels dart across the path or listen to the distant calls of birds. Each moment in nature felt like a gift, a reminder of the wild world the fox kit would eventually rejoin. By Monday, they had fallen back into the rhythm of construction. Tired eyes and stiff muscles notwithstanding, they pressed on, but life had another test in store. A sudden spring storm hit Philadelphia that evening, dumping torrential rain and howling winds. The next morning, the construction site was awash in mud. Large puddles dotted the uneven terrain, and part of the protective fencing had collapsed. Bill was furious, barking orders to get the site back in shape. The men scattered, each tackling a different corner of chaos. At midday, the wind still whipping around them, Sam heard a shout from the far end of the site. Rushing over, he found Trevor, the electrician, hunched over a collapsed trench that had flooded. The water was rising quickly, threatening some exposed wiring. Tony and Miguel arrived, drenched, to find the situation growing dangerous. "If that water reaches the live wires, we're looking at a major hazard," Trevor warned, his voice tight with worry. But the pumps jammed with debris. Without hesitation, Sam and Tony stepped into the knee-high water. Miguel ran to grab a spare shovel and pry out the muck that clogged the pump's intake valve. It was a race against time and the swirling storm water. A misstep could result in an electric shock or a deeper collapse of the trench. Thunder rumbled overhead, echoing the tension in their hearts. The mud clung to their boots, and the wind lashed at their faces. Yet the men moved with a choreographed unity, guided by trust and a shared goal. They had each other's backs, just as they'd done for that fox kit. Only this time, it was human lives and thousands of dollars in equipment on the line. With collective effort, they cleared the debris. Tony braced the pump so it wouldn't tip, while Sam cranked the motor to life. A deep, sputtering groan, then water began gushing out. Relief spread through the group as the flood gradually receded. Despite being soaked and shivering, they patted each other on the backs. They had done it together. That evening, after the storm had passed, The three men found a moment of camaraderie in the brake trailer. Still dripping wet, they warmed themselves with cups of hot coffee, steam rising in the flickering fluorescent light. "You know," Tony said, voice rough but content, "it's kinda like saving that fox. We see a problem, we step up, we take care of it." Miguel raised his cup in a makeshift toast. "Here's to not backing down when things get rough." Sam clinked his cup against theirs, a small grin tugging at his lips. "And here's to that kit, still fighting, still growing, just like us." They sipped in silence, each reflecting on how a single act of compassion had forged a bond that extended beyond a simple rescue. Hardship and danger were part of the job, but they had learned that unity and empathy could carve a path through even the nastiest storms. This was resilience, tested and proven, a testament to how life's smallest moments could forge the deepest connections. The storm, though short-lived, left the construction site in disarray for days. Mud slicked every surface, and water damage forced the team to rework certain areas. Schedules were rearranged, frustrations ran high, and everyone felt the strain of meeting looming deadlines. Yet, through the chaos, Sam, Miguel, and Tony found themselves drawing strength from the memory of the fox kit they had rescued. If they could save a life under worse conditions, they reasoned, they could handle a few setbacks on the job. One crisp afternoon, as the site began to regain some semblance of order, Sam's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, squinting at the screen in the bright sunlight. It was a call from Jordan at the rehab center. Heart pounding, he stepped away from the hammering and drilling to answer. "Hey, Jordan," Sam said, trying to keep his voice calm. "What's up?" "Good news," Jordan replied, the warmth in his voice evident even over the phone. "The fox kit's healthy enough to move to our outdoor enclosure. We think it'll be ready for release in a couple of weeks, provided it continues to progress well." Sam felt a surge of excitement, quickly followed by a wistful ache. He was thrilled to know the kit was doing so well, but the thought of never seeing it again made him strangely sad. That's great news. Think we could stop by this weekend?" "Absolutely. We usually don't let the public interact much with wild animals once they're in the final stages of rehab, but given your role in its rescue, I think we can make an exception. Just a quick visit, though." "Understood," Sam said, a grin plastered across his face. He thanked Jordan and hung up. Immediately, he found Miguel and Tony at the other side of the site. Without saying a word, he held up his phone and let the news spill out. Their reactions mirrored his own excitement, relief, and a bittersweet recognition that their time with the kit was limited. Yet, as the weekend drew near, anticipation filled them, making even the toughest tasks feel lighter. That Saturday morning, the three men piled into Miguel's pickup and navigated the winding roads toward the Schuylkill Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Autumn had begun to show its colors, and the trees lining the park sported hues of gold and crimson. Miguel rolled down the windows, letting in a cool breeze that carried the scent of damp leaves. When they arrived, Jordan greeted them with a friendly nod. "Come on back," he said, leading them through a hallway lined with cages for birds, raccoons, and other small mammals. Outside, they entered a fenced enclosure where a few young foxes were scampering about, each with distinct markings and inquisitive eyes. The wire mesh separated the humans from the animals, but the men could still see them clearly. Jordan pointed to a smaller fox with an elegant mix of red and silver fur. "That's your kit. Doing really well. We've introduced it to these other rescues. Some are orphaned foxes, others were injured. They're learning how to socialize and hunt together." Sam peered through the fence, heart thumping. The fox they had rescued was unrecognizable from the muddy creature they'd pulled from the rubble. Its fur looked sleek now, the patterns more pronounced, and though it remained smaller than the others, It moved with a certain confidence, tail swishing as it explored. Tony let out a soft whistle. Incredible how much it's grown. Miguel nodded. Yeah, it's like night and day. The fox kit noticed them, tilting its head. For a fleeting moment it seemed to lock eyes with the trio. Tony swore he saw a flicker of recognition, but just as quickly the kit scampered off to chase after one of the others. Jordan chuckled. It might remember your scent, but we try to limit human contact at this stage. Once they're bonded with humans, it's harder for them to survive in the wild. Sam sighed, understanding the necessity. He felt a pang, wishing he could stroke the fox's fur one last time, but also relieved to know it was on track for a natural life. They spent another few minutes watching, captivated by the fox's playful antics. The men asked Jordan about release logistics. Where would these foxes go? How far from urban areas? He explained that a partner organization had a private reserve in rural Pennsylvania. Once the foxes mastered basic survival skills, they would be released there, away from busy roads and dense cityscapes. I'm glad we found it when we did, Tony mused quietly. Seeing it run around like that, that's all we really wanted, right? Miguel put a hand on his friend's shoulder. Yeah, a chance at life. Sam felt a mixture of joy and melancholy swirling in his chest. This was likely the last time they'd see the kit they had saved, but maybe that was how it was meant to be. They had done their part. The rest belonged to nature. Before leaving, they thanked Jordan for his hospitality. Dr. Morris also stopped by to express her gratitude for their rescue, noting that the kit's recovery was one of the highlights of their recent cases. She even joked, "You three might want to consider part-time jobs here," eliciting laughter all around. On the drive back to the city, the men were unusually quiet, each absorbed in his own thoughts. They had witnessed a remarkable transformation. Muddy desperation turned into wild grace. There was pride in that, and also a kind of humility. Life could flourish against all odds if given the right help. The Philadelphia skyline loomed in the distance, a blend of steel and concrete. Back to the grind tomorrow, Sam finally said, his tone wistful yet content. Miguel nodded, eyes on the road. But we'll carry this with us, you know? Tony looked at the trees flashing by, the colors of autumn blending into a mosaic of golds, reds, and browns. Yeah, he said softly, we sure will. And in that moment, each man felt a quiet certainty they might never own that fox, never cuddle it in their arms again, but they had given it the greatest gift, freedom. And in return, it had given them something equally precious, a deeper understanding of empathy, a glimpse of hope in a world that often felt too hard-edged, and a unifying bond that would remain long after the last rivet was driven into the steel bones of their construction site. Life at the construction site soon reached a crescendo of intensity. As autumn deepened and cooler winds swept through Philadelphia, deadlines loomed large for the condo project. Bill, the foreman, pushed everyone harder, and tension reverberated across the crew. Arguments flared more easily, and any misstep could lead to costly delays. For Sam, Tony, and Miguel, the fox kit had become a sort of mental anchor. When the stress felt overwhelming, one of them would mention the little fox, and they'd remember how an act of kindness could cut through life's noise. One morning, however, an unexpected crisis struck. An inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, frowning at the newly installed wiring in the lower floors. As he surveyed the electrical setups, his concern grew, culminating in a stern verdict. These circuits aren't up to code. The entire system might need rewiring. Trevor, the electrician who'd worked the job, was adamant that the wiring was fine, but the inspector wouldn't budge. Bill's anger erupted like a storm, and soon the project stalled while they figured out how to rectify the issue. The cost of rework threatened to skyrocket, putting jobs and timelines in jeopardy. Sam watched Bill stomp around, phone pressed to his ear, likely calling the project's investors with damage control. The sense of impending disaster was palpable. Tony kicked a metal scrap in frustration, while Miguel tried to calm Trevor, who looked on the verge of tears over the accusations of substandard work. "This is a mess," Trevor muttered, shoulders sagging. "I did everything by the book. Why won't he believe me?" Miguel placed a reassuring hand on Trevor's back. "We'll figure it out. Let's review the plans again. See if there's an error or misunderstanding." As the day wore on, the men pored over diagrams, consulted with supervisors, and tried to contact the city's code enforcement department for clarification. Despite their efforts, an undercurrent of unease rippled through the construction site like a frayed electric wire, ready to spark at any moment. By the time quitting time rolled around, Sam's head throbbed with fatigue. Tony looked equally drained, and Miguel's usual calm seemed close to cracking. They decided to grab a quick bite at a local diner before heading home. Over greasy burgers and steaming cups of coffee, they hashed out the day's stress. "Feels like we're always fighting an uphill battle," Tony lamented, stirring his coffee absently. Sam nodded. "Yeah, one thing after another. Storms, code issues. Sometimes it feels like the universe is telling us something." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" Sam gave a sardonic chuckle. "No idea, but I keep thinking about the Fox kit. How it survived, even though the odds were stacked against it." He paused, his tone softening. "Maybe that's a reminder that we can get through this too." Tony leaned back, a pensive expression on his face. "You know, it's funny how that one event changed the way I see things. Problems at work used to send me into a tailspin. But after saving a life, it puts things in perspective." Miguel tapped his mug. "I hear you. That little fox overcame a mess bigger than itself. We can handle this code issue, especially if we stick together." Their conversation blurred the lines between mundane job woes and deeper reflections on purpose and resilience. By the time they parted ways, they felt a quiet determination stirring beneath their fatigue. Over the next several days, they threw themselves into the task of rectifying the wiring problem. They documented each step, double-checked every conduit and breaker panel. Trevor discovered a discrepancy in the code the inspector cited. Turns out, there had been an update in local regulations that even the foreman hadn't fully accounted for. With evidence in hand, they requested a second inspection. The second inspector arrived with the same stern expression, but listened carefully to their explanations. After thorough checks, he said, "You're right. These updates weren't clearly communicated. The wiring is fine, as long as you make these minor adjustments." He pointed to a few elements that needed tweaking, but nothing catastrophic. Relief coursed through the team like a cooling wave on a scorching day. Bill even mustered a rare grin, patting Trevor on the shoulder in a silent apology for his earlier outburst. As they tidied up the site that evening, Tony turned to Sam and Miguel. "We did it." Miguel wiped sweat from his brow. "We sure did." Sam, gazing at the setting sun reflecting off newly installed windows, recalled how tenuous hope could be like a lost fox kit in a muddy construction site. Yet, with unity and determination, they'd navigated the challenge together. "Maybe we're all stronger than we think," he said quietly. They lingered a moment, reveling in the sense of accomplishment. The fiasco had cost them time and energy, but it also tested their resolve. Each day seemed to echo the lesson of that Fox kit. Survival is possible through trust, kindness, and resilience, even in the roughest terrain. October's chill morphed into the crisp bite of November. The changing season was reflected in the cityscape. As the construction site neared a major milestone, the structural completion of the condo building's frame. The next phases involved interior installations, drywall, plumbing, painting. Though challenges remained, the future no longer looked as murky as it had in the stormy past weeks. For Sam, Tony, and Miguel, Life was also moving forward in ways both small and significant. Tony's daughter had her wildlife conservation project displayed in a local library, beaming with pride as she pointed out the facts about fox habitats and adaptation. Miguel's renewed sense of care for his environment led him to volunteer for a weekend park cleanup, surprising even himself with how good it felt to give back. Sam, inspired by their ordeal with the fox kit, began browsing job listings outside pure construction positions that integrated environmental concerns or philanthropic angles. Late one afternoon, a call from Jordan at the Skill Wildlife Rehabilitation Center lit up Sam's phone once more. This time, the update was brief but loaded with meaning. The fox kit, along with the others, will be released next week. If you want to witness it, come by the reserve in Lancaster County on Wednesday. Sam's heart fluttered as he relayed the news to Tony and Miguel. Instantly, they agreed to take the day off, or at least part of it, to drive to Lancaster and witness the fox kit's final step back into the wild. Bill, surprisingly supportive, granted them the time with minimal grumbling. Wednesday dawned with a pale autumn sun cutting through a veil of mist. They set out early, the city's skyline receding in the rearview mirror as highways gave way to winding country roads. Fields stretched out on either side, dotted with barns and silos, a stark contrast to the concrete world they were used to. Upon arriving at the reserve, they followed signs to a clearing where Jordan and Dr. Morris awaited. A few other volunteers and staff milled about, preparing crates that contained the young foxes. The men's excitement mingled with a hint of melancholy. They knew this would be the last time they'd see the kit. Jordan greeted them warmly, pointing to a line of crates spaced evenly apart. They're skittish, which is good. Means they're not too attached to humans, he said, popping open the back of one crate. A flash of red-brown fur and bright eyes darted back, then disappeared behind the crate door. Dr. Morris stepped forward, wearing a khaki vest and a wide-brimmed hat. We'll release them one at a time, ensuring they run off safely. The reserve is private land, far from busy roads, and there's ample food supply. It's as ideal as it gets. Miguel craned his neck, trying to identify their fox. Tony spotted it first, in a crate near the middle. "That's ours," he whispered, catching a glimpse of the silvery patch on its flank. The fox shifted nervously, but its eyes remained sharp. Jordan signaled for silence as he prepared to open the first crate. A volunteer lifted the door, and a small fox bolted out in a streak of red, dashing toward the distant tree line without a backward glance. Applause rippled through the small group, followed by hushed excitement. The next few minutes unfolded in similar fashion, each crate opening to release another fox into freedom. Finally, it was their kit's turn. Dr. Morris gave a slight nod, carefully unfastening the door. The fox hesitated for a fraction of a second, nose twitching at the unfamiliar scents of damp leaves and open fields. Then, like an arrow loosed from a bow, it sprinted across the clearing, lean, agile, and undeniably wild. A surge of emotion welled up in Sam, Miguel, and Tony. For a moment, time seemed to slow, each step of the fox etched into their memories. The kit briefly paused near the edge of the clearing, ears perked. It glanced back, or so it seemed, before disappearing into the tall grass and bramble. Applause, muffled sobs, and smiles blended in the crisp air. The group of onlookers whispered congratulations, clapped each other on the back. Dr. Morris and Jordan exchanged satisfied grins, another success story in their mission to heal and release. The men found themselves standing still, gazing at the spot where the fox had vanished. Tony cleared his throat, wiping his eyes discreetly. "I didn't think I'd get this emotional," he admitted with a half laugh, half sob. Miguel clasped his shoulder. "It's all right. Means we cared." Sam inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill his lungs. We gave it a second chance. That's all we can do. Jordan approached them, shaking each of their hands. Thank you, seriously. This wouldn't have been possible without your rescue. Now that kit has a real shot at a natural life. They nodded, hearts full yet tinged with an odd sadness at saying goodbye. It felt like witnessing a child's graduation, pride and loss intermingled. Eventually, they walked back to their truck, passing farmland quiet, except for the distant lowing of cows. Silence settled among them, each absorbing the gravity of what they had just witnessed. As the truck rumbled onto the main road, Tony turned on the radio softly, a gentle guitar melody filling the cab. They left Lancaster County with light hearts, forging back toward the city that needed their sweat, skill, and determination. But they also carried the memory of that fox's final dash into freedom, a reminder that sometimes the biggest gifts come wrapped in mud and uncertainty, and that letting go can be the sweetest form of caring. Back at the construction site, the condo project continued its march toward completion. Drywall teams came in, followed by painters and finish carpenters. Each floor began to resemble the sleek, modern living spaces advertised in glossy brochures. The skyline changed daily, a testament to both human industry and the ever-evolving nature of urban life. For the trio of friends, the experience with the Fox kit served as a lodestar, guiding their actions and attitudes. When Bill announced a new safety protocol, instead of grumbling about extra steps, they took it as an opportunity to ensure no worker and no creature fell through the cracks. When disagreements arose among the crew, they were often the peacemakers, reminding everyone that they were all on the same team. The final beams were set, the windows sealed, and the structure neared readiness for its first tenants. Local media even ran a small feature on the development, highlighting the diverse team of workers who brought it to life. In one interview, Tony found himself surprisingly articulate about the sense of pride and responsibility he felt. Meanwhile, Sam's quiet exploration of job opportunities bore fruit. He discovered a city-run program called Philadelphia Greenworks, which specialized in sustainable building practices. They were looking for someone with hands-on construction experience and a passion for environmental stewardship, someone who could bridge the gap between the practical needs of construction crews and the ecological interests of the city. Buoyed by his recent experiences, Sam decided to apply. Miguel also found himself at a crossroads. The success of the farm he grew up on had always weighed on his mind. His mother was getting older, and the family needed help. The rescue of the fox had rekindled memories of caring for animals in barns and fields. An idea germinated. He could possibly buy or lease a small patch of land near the city to create a space for rescued or stray animals, a halfway point between the wild and the metropolis. The notion seemed daunting, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt like a calling. Tony, for his part, was content to stay in construction, but he began thinking about ways to give back to the community. His daughter's passion for wildlife conservation inspired him. Together, they organized a small weekend fundraiser at her school, raising money for Skill Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Donations rolled in slowly but steadily, and Tony found himself smiling more often, proud of the example he was setting. As winter approached, the men paused one evening to reflect on how much had changed in the span of a few months. They stood on the roof of the newly completed condominium tower, surveying the city lights. The crisp wind carried a faint smell of snow. "Remember when we found that kit, thinking it was just a dirty puppy?" Tony mused, leaning on the safety railing. Miguel laughed softly. "I'll never forget the look on your face when we realized it was a fox." Sam grinned, recalling the swirl of emotions he felt in that moment: curiosity, panic, awe. "Feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes I wonder, how's it doing now? Probably exploring those woods, hunting small prey, living its life the way nature intended." They let the silence settle, gazing at the infinite scatter of city lights, each a testament to a life, a story unfolding in countless apartments, offices, and streets. The wind whipped around them, cold but invigorating. Eventually, Tony broke the silence. "Guys, I don't think any of us expected to change so much, but I'm proud of who we've become." Sam patted his friend's shoulder. "Me too. And the best part is, this isn't the end. It's just a step in whatever's next." Miguel nodded, eyes bright. "We build structures, but we're also building ourselves. Each challenge, each act of kindness, it all adds layers to who we are." They stood there a while longer, letting the magnitude of their transformations sink in. The condo project they once viewed as just another job had become a crucible for personal growth. In saving a tiny life, they found new purpose and direction for their own. A few days later, Sam received a call from Philadelphia Greenworks. He got the position. With equal parts excitement and nervousness, he thanked them, quietly marveling at how a series of small decisions adopting compassion, stepping out of comfort zones, had led him here. Meanwhile, Miguel began drafting a plan for an urban farm and animal sanctuary, scribbling budget estimates on napkins whenever inspiration struck. Tony continued to be the rock for his family, investing in his daughter's dreams while bringing positivity to the construction site. And so the building rose to completion, its glass facade reflecting the city around it. On the day the last inspection cleared, Bill gathered the crew for a small celebration. There were donuts, coffee, and hearty applause. Some workers patted Sam, Tony, and Miguel on the back, acknowledging not just their hard work, but the moral courage they'd shown in the months prior. That evening, as they cleaned their tools for the final time at that site, they paused together for a moment. The sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, lighting up the sky as if to say, "Well done." In their minds, the memory of the Fox kit flitted once again, a reminder that small, unlikely encounters can shape entire futures. They parted ways, each man carrying the day's sunset in his heart, along with the knowledge that they had changed, grown, and found deeper meaning in their labor. The city hummed around them, alive with possibility, as they stepped forward on paths forged by compassion and resilience, ready to build not just walls and roofs, but the very foundations of a life well lived. When Sam, Tony, and Miguel first discovered what they believed was a dirty, stray puppy, they couldn't have imagined the transformative impact of that fleeting moment of compassion. In rescuing a frightened fox kit and shepherding it toward freedom, these hard-working construction workers uncovered reservoirs of empathy, courage, and a renewed sense of purpose. Their bond deepened as they confronted setbacks on the job, navigated personal dreams, and found the resilience to create a better world, one small act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you help us reach more people with inspiring tales of second chances, human connections, and the unexpected blessings that can arise from even the smallest gestures of compassion. Join us in celebrating the power of ordinary heroes to shine a light in the darkest corners, reminding us all that hope and renewal can be found where we least expect them.